Hey guys, welcome to today's video. We are going to share with you some of the details on how we completed the rafters and sheathing on these porches and how we tied them into the main structure on the house. I hope you enjoy. We're hand cutting rafters for the back porch, and I want to show you how we're doing this. I know some people have asked about how we're connecting the roof line from the porch into the roof line on the house. This is going to show you how we're doing the roof on the porch because it's a little different than setting trusses. We're hand building these rafters and setting them in with a double bird mouth. So let me show you how we're doing that. What we're doing here is test fitting a board and making a pattern for all the subsequent rafters on the side that we're working on. We have a blueprint that showed the exact measurements for the bird mouth cuts, both the seat and plunge cuts, but our actual field measurements were just slightly different. And we decided to try this, just get a board up there, set it, fit it, and take some measurements, cut a pattern, see how it works, and then we can run with the rest of the rafters and get everything marked and cut expeditiously. Seemed to work really well. Probably the most critical thing when doing this, get yourself a good pattern board. You can see this is the peak. The notch was called out in the blueprints for the porches, so we went with what they had for the measurements, and then we had to tweak it just a little bit for ours. But this is the sitting where it sits on the ridge beam, and then the little bird mouth down here is where it sits on the plate beam. And again, all the seat cuts and the plunge cuts, seat cut, plunge cut, was all called out, spelled out in the blueprints, and we just modified it slightly. And that's kind of the look at where we're at with it right now, and I'll show you how we're connecting these. With this top cut, I know you guys are probably thinking there's not much meat there, and I would totally agree with you. So we have a bracket that we're putting on the top. There was a manufacturing error when building these, so we had to make some adjustments, and they helped me out. Harmony Timber Works helped me out with that, and we adjusted this plunge cut, and it's as you can see, way past halfway on the board. So let me show you how we're doing that once I get this next board cut out. And here's where the pattern board really pays off. You don't have to pull your speed square out every time you need to make a rafter. You can literally just lay your pattern board on top and mark it out. Now the key thing to remember is make sure you put the crown to the top. My pattern board has the crown to the top, and then all the subsequent boards I crown the same way. That way your angled cuts come out as close to accurate as you can get, and then just remember to cut the line off because you're using that pattern board and you're marking it. That'll keep you accurate. Since we had the measurements accurate on the timbers, the pattern worked pretty much all the way across for all the rafters, which is nice. We're up here on the ridge, and what isn't to spec with the blueprint is this reveal right here. This should be 3 inches, and we're actually at a 5-inch reveal, and that throws everything off. And you can see we're nice and tight down below here. So this notch, these 2 keyways here should have been cut just a little bit deeper so this ridge beam drops in. So in order to have our rafters run in parallel with the top of the truss, we had to notch these out a little extra. And since we're beyond halfway here, well beyond halfway, we put these hanger brackets in. These are Simpson Strong Tie RR-R brackets. So these brackets are not made to have this piece over top of them because there's a hole here to put a nail in or a screw. I'm using screws on everything except for this top plate. We're using nails so we can get our rafter to sit down nice and tight on top of the plate. And that runs all the way down. Just kind of a little look down. There's all of our cuts. And to give you a little look here, it's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. I guess this is my second roof build now, but that's what we're looking at. A little bit of a gap under that one there. but it's all in plain. So that's how we're doing the tops. Here we're using the Simpson strong tie along with the seat cut and the plunge cut, the bird mouth here on top. And then down bottom, we're doing the same thing. It's a little bit different. I'll give you a look at that. So down here, we're using these timber lock screws. Every once in a while, you get into a position where you have a timber lock screw over a knot. So we're just taking some screws and, do you call it toenailing or toe screwing? Into the side here. And we'll just take a grinder and knock that off. But that's how that all looks. And you can kind of see the seat cuts on top. And most of the plunge cuts look pretty good. This one's got a slight gap to it. This one's got a slight gap, probably an 1/8 inch gap to it. But if you get your plate beams to run square out with your ridge beams, you should be able to make that one pattern board, and it should work pretty much all the way out. You can see we're off just a little bit. We're probably off an 1/8 inch, maybe a 1/4 inch from these two beams running perfectly, you know, parallel to one another as it comes out. And then we'll have a rafter over this, and then our tongue and groove planking for the ceiling will slide right in between this top of this truss and the rafter. So it'll make it a nice finished look. And hopefully we'll get this finished up tomorrow morning, and maybe even get this other side, get our pattern made for the other side. The other side is just a little bit different. We took one from this side and flipped it over, and there's about probably 3/8 inch gap on the other side. So what we'll do is we'll make a pattern and start out over here, get our pattern made, and then just run it out, and hopefully we can get that all finished up before lunchtime tomorrow. So we'll see. We'll check in with you guys tomorrow. We have the rafters over the porch finished up, and now we're going to bring the roof line back, and we'll show you how we're calculating our center point for our ridge board to come back from our post. So the first step here is to figure out the height of your ridge board, where you want that to be, because the rafters plane into that, with it being 1.5 inches wide at the top, you know, that changes the angle just a little bit. You want all your rafters, as they come off the porch and up over the house, you want those all to be in plane with one another. You don't want a hump or a dip there. So we stayed down like 1/2 inch from the peak, and then we put our string line there, ran it back, and put a string level on the line here, and then we just found where we wanted the top of the ridge board. And my father-in-law's running the string there. So we're pretty happy with that. So we put a mark there for the height, and then I measure from the eave end over to the center of the post, which is where the ridge board is going to be at the bottom. Take that measurement, write it down, wrote it on the roof there, and then bring that up to the top, and that's how you find the lateral center, so you know exactly where the middle of that ridge board should fall. And that's where it's important to have your eave end nice and square and your roof square. And then it's time to figure out where the sleepers go, and it was pretty easy. We just butted it up against the rafter there to keep the plane the same. Once we were happy with that, we run a chalk line, and this is where the sleeper board goes, right on that chalk line. And when we set our roof sheathing, we'll know that that roof sheathing is going to go beyond that chalk line, and I'll show you a little bit later in this video how to get that, or how to find that location. Now we just concentrating on the framing and getting these rafters all in plane, nice and square coming back. We do the same on the other side. Lay the board over there, get a mark, snap a chalk line. We've snapped our lines. We've come up to our point. We set our 2x10 ridge board. Got it nice and level, and it's just below, you can see it's just below the peak on those, so the rafters run the same. Decent cut here. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And the blue chalk line is where our sleepers are going to go, and then our OSB will be about 2 inches outside that, which will put us right on the screw, which is where our center point is, both laterally and vertically. So that's what we're looking at. So we're going to get our sleeper set here and get this all fastened down so it doesn't move, and then we can start putting some rafters in. The next step is to start your rafter layout, and we wanted to stay on our 16s on center as we come off the porch roof and come into the overframing on the house. And the way our blueprints are designed, we should have the first 2 rafters on the overframe 16 on center, then it lengthens to 24 on center because your rafters start to get pretty short, and then at the very end 48 on center. Now with our blueprints, if you have prints designed for your house, which I highly recommend, you can always overbuild from those prints. You can always go above and beyond, but you can never go under or underbuild according to the prints. So in order for our sheets to come out on the 8-foot to come out on a rafter, we decided to go 16 like the prints called for the first 2, and then just take 24 on center all the way back until we were finished. Seemed to work out really well that way, that our sheets all ended on a rafter and we didn't have to chop too much up as we moved back. The other important thing to remember when you're trying to do this that I found as a challenge is just keeping your rafter square as you move back. Here's my first cut on the rafter. This is a long 6/12 cut, so you need your carpenter's square to make this cut, and then you have to bevel your saw. For us, for a 4/12, it's about 18 degrees, I think 18.4 to be exact. I set my saw at roughly 18 degrees to make that bevel cut, and then a straight 6 at the top. And it's really not that hard once you kind of get into a rhythm and you can just kind of go with it. But I will say it's nice having 2 circular saws when you're doing this. The plunge cut at the top is obviously not a beveled cut, so I have my cordless DeWalt set up to do the bevel cuts, and it seemed to handle it pretty well. And then I have my corded skill saw to do the straight plunge cut. The other thing to remember when you're doing these rafters is when you take your measurements, take everything off the long point. So after you cut the long 6/12 there, I always measure off that long point because it's beveled there. So just be careful with that. A couple of nails in the top, and then a couple toenail in the bottom, and then 1 through the top, and that'll fasten your rafter. It's really not that big of a roof, and it gets pretty small really quick when you're coming back on this. So we tried to measure off of the rafters on the porch to come over to keep it square, and then we just double checked, as you can see there, double checked everything with the carpenter's square, make sure we're running parallel as we move back on the roof. The angles kind of throw your eyes a little bit, so it's just something to be aware of and be cognizant of when you're doing these cuts. Here we're marking out a rafter, and this is how we kind of mark out the bottom portion, measure over, and just get it to where we're on our 16 on center. The top is obviously pretty easy because it has to be straight across from the other one. And then we can take our measurement from the marks that my father-in-law put down there when we squared the board up, and that's how you get your length. And unfortunately this board, I think I had to cut a couple of times for some reason. It just wasn't working out for whatever reason, but you'll have that. I'd rather cut a couple of times as opposed to cut one too short. Another tip that we found out when we did the front porch, and we were a little more cognizant of it when we did this back, it's real easy to push or pull that ridge board and make it so it's not running straight. So just keep that in mind as you're putting these rafters up. Try not to force them in, and try not to pull that ridge board to make things work. And you want that running as straight as possible all the way back. And we found out on the front porch, if we build a couple of rafters on one side and then go to the other side and go back and forth, that kind of helps you prevents you from pushing and warping that ridge board, getting it all out of whack. So we kind of, on this back side, went back and forth, put a couple up on one side and then go back to the other side and put a couple up on the other side. Nailing the other side is a little bit tricky too. I elected to nail in from the opposite side and nail into the plunge cut area, just running them in at an angle, almost like toenailing them. But it all worked out. You just got to take your time and make sure you're measuring from the right points as you go. And like I said, once you get into a rhythm, it goes pretty quick. You can see it nailed in through the back side there. That seemed to work pretty well. And that's really all there is to the overframe. If you notice, the ridge board, the sleepers run up alongside the ridge board and the ridge board kind of ties into the sides of them. You can actually have your ridge board set on top of your sleepers if you want as well. We elected not to do that. I have a purlin directly below that ridge board, so there's a lot of support there under the roof. The frame, the house framing is supporting it. But if you didn't have one there, you can lay your ridge board on top of the sleepers. Just cut an extra 1.5 inches off, and that'll give you a little extra support if you need it there. But we elected to do it this way since we have the support underneath. And that's it for the framing. We move on to sheathing next. Okay, we've started the sheathing on the back side, and we've started at the bottom. I think the best way to do this, so you can get accurate measurements over to your angled sleeper board, start at the bottom, lay up, and then as you come up, make this bottom piece. You're actually coming top down once you get over the house. That'll allow you to get accurate measurements from here to your sleeper for your bottom board cuts. And then we'll have the top all done, and it's easy to work over this stuff where you're walking over the roof. So in order to keep this line going straight across, what I do is put a level on this top side and then strike a line. You could chalk it if you wanted to. It's easier for me just with a level and a pencil. Set it here and mark your lines out. So when we put our top row, I'm going to come back with the top row next, and I'll know where the bottom of that top row should fall on all these rafters coming down. And then that'll make these end cuts real simple. You just need to take 2 measurements and you'll have your angle on the end piece. So that's what we've found anyways to be the easiest to sheet this overframe portion, which is a little tricky. Here's how I find the edge of my OSB as it comes off the roof here and meets this other roof. Put my level here, get a measurement, carry that measurement up, strike a line all the way up, and then as I bring my sheets over, I have a line that I can measure to and get my cuts nice and straight and parallel with this line. I thought we'd end this video with showing you how we dealt with the uneven terrain on the back side there by the crawl space. Couldn't use the scaffolding wagon, so I had to use the Mahindra. Just put a 4x4 pallet on there with some OSB on top to make a little platform, and then used it to get on top of the roof. Worked pretty well for one person doing sheathing. It's a lot of up and down, but I think it's a safe way of doing it. Unfortunately, I would have had to unhook my safety harness a million times as I go up and down, so I elected not to wear it. Probably not the best decision, but it did save a lot of time for me, and I was in a little bit of a rush with the weather, the way it's been here lately in North Carolina. We've just, every day it's been raining almost, it seems. So, and then I kind of eat my words here. Instead of going top down, I lay bottom up on this side, and it seemed to work pretty well. Top down worked well on the other side. I guess it was just the way the sheathing came out, and this side came out just a little bit different, and I decided to go bottom up. So I guess with that being said, run it how you want. Either way works really well, in my opinion, so it's just personal preference. But I'm glad the sheathing is done. It is a big job to do this, to get the sheathing up there. It's a ton of up and down. You're going to burn a lot of energy, a lot of calories, but it is done, and I'm happy. That's all I have for you guys on this. We'll end with a little drone video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.